Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to BWTM Sports. Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Williams, a fight that's got a lot of people talking at the moment, and there's been a lot of hype around it, mainly because of Liam Williams. Liam Williams has talked about how he doesn't like Chris Eubank Jr., how he's not his cup of tea, he's this, he's that. So it's become a grudge match because of Liam Williams. You see, and anytime a person starts talking like that for a grudge match, people are interested. And then it's at Liam Williams' hometown or his city of Cardiff in Wales. So Eubank again will be painted as the villain, and Williams will be painted as the hero. You know how it goes. There's genuine grudge matches with real needle, and it's bad blood from the start. And that there's something that's happened in the past and they've got to settle it. And, for example, Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury, the third fight, there was something, there was real bad blood between the two guys. You could see, and even in the way they fought, the way they dressed one another, and then with the intensity of the fight afterwards, that was what you would call a grudge match right there. So I've been watching this and I've been really excited. Obviously, like most people, the one thing they want to see is the gloves are off. We've seen the preview for the gloves are off on YouTube. And, Eubanks called him a turncoat. And Williams has turned around and said that if he took him in the back room, he'd sort him out. So just want to see how that evolves or what happens to that gloves are off. Now, that gloves are off special was filmed after the press conference they did. So I guess they still would have been quite fired up and stuff. But subsequently to that gloves are off, which hasn't been released yet, there's been various interviews with Liam Williams. The most recent interview I saw of Liam Williams, I want to see how intense he is and how much he dislikes Chris Eubank Jr. And his whole conversation, his whole demeanor seems to be changing from that press conference and all he was saying previously to when he signed for the fight. And now he's now talking about, I think I can knock him out. I think I can do this. I think I can do that. I have to dislike the guy to beat him. And it's almost like as the fight's going on now, he seems to be unraveling, or what he's saying seems to be not matching up with what he was saying at the beginning and before the fight was signed. And the reason I say this, and I go down this route before I go into my breakdown for the actual fight, is that I've seen way too many fights now where people are saying they dislike one another and blah, 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 blah. And when it comes down to the fight and it comes down to putting it together, they're not performing. They don't perform. It's not much of a performance. And it's almost like all that was said before was just to get the fight. And I hope it doesn't end up like that, because the way Liam Williams is speaking now, and we're a week from the fight and the interviews he's been doing, he seems to be, from really saying he dislikes Eubank that much to saying he's not my type of guy. Well, it's a fight. And, I've got to dislike the guy. Obviously, can't like the guy before a fight. The way he's talking, seems to be, the steam seems to be coming out of the Liam Williams sort of motivation as to why he hates Chris Eubank so much, as he said in the beginning, or he dislikes him so much. You're saying, why ain't you popping on about this point? Because I'm going to go on further about other things I see in Liam Williams I'm a little concerned about. Now, on to Chris Eubank Jr. for a second. So I want you to call him Chris E for this fight, or Chris Eggington, or Chris Eccles, or Chris, I don't know, Eels. And forget for him being Chris Eubank Jr. for a minute, because what comes with Chris Eubank Jr. are a few, I don't want to say black marks, but the things they say about Chris Eubank Jr., he's failed when he's failed at world level. You know, he's only got the opportunities because of his father. He's not that good. He's just a brawler. Every time he's got to top level, he's been exposed. Okay, so those are all the things said about Chris Eubank Jr. So, like I said, let's forget about him being Chris Eubank Jr. for a second, and let's look at him as being just Chris E. All right. So he's had very little amateur pedigree, very little amateur experience. He's coming to the pro game. He's had a number of fights, which any professional fighter will have to build himself up, to make his reputation be what it is. You know, people to put bums on seats and say, oh, this guy looks like a killer. This guy looks like he could do the business. And Eubank did well. He was knocking guys out, stopping guys, and looking quite impressive on that way up. And he talked himself up, you know. And he took that fight against Billy Joe Saunders, which he lost, but he didn't lose that badly in. Now, bearing in mind Chris Eubank Jr., look at this now from a guy who didn't have much amateur pedigree against a guy in Billy Joe Saunders who was an Olympian, who was, you know, won ABAs, the top fighter in the amateurs, and was doing very well in the pros as well, established pro. And Eubank Jr. pushed him close there. Yes, he lost, but he pushed him close. And for the first 4 to 5 rounds, Eubank didn't do really anything in the fight. Was scared of going, not scared of going to 12 rounds, but really for Eubank Jr., he was concerned about doing 12 rounds. He'd never done 12 rounds before. They started early. Mistakes were made. His father was in the corner. You know all the rest of it. Okay, so he lost that fight. But I want you to look at it from that perspective, not the fact that he's Chris Eubank's father. He's not the the son of Chris Eubank Jr. Senior. Now, if you add that into the mix now, his Chris Eubank's son, the former WBO middleweight and super middleweight champion of the world, made record defense of the WBO title, was in some great fights with Nigel Benn, Michael Watson, Steve Collins. He even fought Joe Kawasaki. So his dad's a legend in his own right. Eubank's then gone on his career. He's picked up the IBO title. You know, he's then moved up in weight. He's fought George Groves, another seasoned pro, you know, in the tournament, Muhammad Ali tournament, I can't remember, Super 6 or what it was. And he's done well there as well. Although he's come close against George Groves, world champion, elite amateur, very good pro fighter, you know, established fighter in George Groves, and a world champion and George Groves a world champion in his own right. And he goes close against him as well. So there's been no time where Eubank's been absolutely throttled. And along the way, Eubank has fought guys like James DeGale, Arthur Abraham. You know, Arthur Abraham at the time before was a seasoned pro who was a big puncher, did very well. It was a feared one, the number one middleweight in the world at one point. And Eubank beat Arthur Abraham. You know, he's had some good wins along the way. For a guy that had no amateur pedigree, no amateur background, is coming to the pro ranks and basically been learning on the job. And I think that's forgotten a lot with Eubank Jr. And there's this expectation that he will be a bona fide world champion. He has picked up the IBO belt as well along the way. And I just think that maybe too much was expected of Eubank too soon. He's now hooked up with Roy Jones Jr. And from my experience of Roy Jones Jr. training fighters, my good friend Isaac Chilembe, the former IBO super middleweight champion of the world, Roy's been working with him for a while, and Chilembe has come on leaps and bounds as a fighter, you know, and Roy has taught him so much. And as Isaac told me, that Roy is a very, very, very good trainer. He's got an excellent eye and studies detail very well. And now he's taken in with Eubank. Eubank has kind of modeled and taken a lot of what Roy Jones has. He's really now mentored. Roy and Eubank have molded. They found Eubank has found his niche, as far as I'm concerned. He's found his spot, the sweet spot, with somebody he recognizes, respects, and he can't really talk back to, because that Roy Jones Jr. is an absolute legend. So he admires Roy, and he's able to take on some of Roy's attributes with his own hand speed, punching power, great chin, great work rate. So when Eubank's been criticized for he can't box, or he's just a brawler, he's now taken on what Roy Jones is giving him, and he's added that to his arsenal. And he's now having fought, for me, at a much higher level consistently to Liam Williams. Should be the favorite coming into the fight. And for me, he also should be considered, at 32 years old, having made mistakes, changing trainers. He now seems to settle with Roy Jones. We've had COVID as well and the pandemic. He's now settled with Roy Jones Jr. And that combination of Roy Jones Jr. and Eubank and the things he brought to the table before he was with Roy makes for a very interesting and further dynamic combination. Back to Liam Williams. Liam Williams, he fought Andrade for the world title. Again, he made the Andrade fight one where he was, he didn't like Andrade. I think that's just the way Liam Williams is. He just doesn't like who he fights, and that's fine. You're not meant to like the guy you're fighting anyway, but he seemed to make a meal of it. Used a lot of energy up on that. And as soon as Andrade put him on him, first or second round, put it on him, first time he got hit, he got rocked quite badly by a guy in Andrade who's not really known as a big puncher at middleweight. He's a skillful, slick boxer, but not known as a big puncher. And he wobbled Williams and hurt him in this, I think, first or second round. And he dropped him again with a 1-2 later on in the fight. And he was able to hurt Williams and catch Williams consistently with the uppercut over and over and over again. He kept getting hit with the uppercut. And for me, Williams is a guy that he seems to only fight in one gear. He seems to fight only one way. He doesn't seem to have a plan B. He doesn't seem to be able to make adjustments when he gets hurt or when he's put on him. But they say he's a big puncher, but I'm yet to see where this big punch is. He fought, it was at light middleweight. He fought with Liam Smith. He went 2 fights from 12 rounds to Liam Smith. He caught Smith with some good shots, but at no point did he look close to knocking Liam Smith out. And that was at light middleweight. Up at middleweight, he caught Andrade with a couple of shots here and there, but didn't do anything significant for me to make him think that he's this big puncher. So, I mean, he's advertised as a big puncher, but who is he knocked out to say he's a credible big puncher? That's the thing I'm asking here. He gets hit way too much for my liking. As for Eubank Jr., because he's with that Roy Jones style, Eubank did used to hold his hands low, but now with Eubank, with the Roy Jones style, he hangs his hand out. The problem with that is if Williams is smart enough, he can get where Eubank throws the jab, he can throw the right hand through the middle. Eubank, defensively, when he's against the ropes, I've always had a concern about Eubank when he's against the ropes. If Liam Williams can really test that style that Eubank has now, if you can put the pressure on Eubank, and keep the fight close to Eubank, I think that makes it a good fight. But I think if the fight's at distance, mid to long range, I think Eubank is going to pepper Williams with punches. I'm actually looking, when I look at this fight, I think this fight could get stopped inside the distance, inside 6 rounds. I think Williams gets hit way too often. And based on what I saw in the Andrade fight, and Eubank he's not a big super middleweight, but he's fought a super middleweight. And he's never, and even when he was at super middleweight, George Groves wasn't able to run through him. And nobody I've seen so far has fought Chris Eubank has been able to steamroll him, run through him, significantly hurt him, and back him up in that way. So I really feel that Eubank is the big middleweight in that. He's a big middleweight compared to Liam Williams, once again moving up from light middleweight to middleweight. Say Eubank is the legit middleweight here. He's the bigger guy in this fight as far as I'm concerned. He's fought at a much higher level. He's fought he's fought in the much more competitive fights. And it has to be said, Liam Williams, when he stepped up to fight at world level, he's been beat. So the same things you could put up Chris Eubank Jr., you could put to Liam Williams. And, probably Liam Williams, I don't know, Liam Williams probably had a better amateur pedigree than Chris Eubank Jr. So Chris Eubank Jr., as far as I'm concerned, has done very well for a man that hasn't had an amateur pedigree. And yes, we say Chris Eubank Jr. has his father, but his father can't fight for him. The same thing could be said for Conor Benn. Conor Benn has got no real amateur pedigree, and he's doing well at the moment in the pro game. So people expect the guys from the amateur pedigree, who's had very little amateur pedigree, to go into the pro game and fight the same way as the guy who's fought and had a gold medal, Olympic winning champion, or a guy who's fought in the world championships and won, or guys won the ABA championships and has been a stellar amateur. Expect them to fight the same way, and in the same way that guy had very little amateur experience fights in the pro game. So Eubank Jr. has, I feel, at times been unfairly criticised. That being said, his father, Chris Eubank Sr., probably didn't do himself any favours when he was talking around saying that Eubank Jr. is going to be better than Floyd Mayweather Sr. and all this stuff, next gen. There's promotion, and then there's putting you on a bit too thick, and people have those expectations, and when you don't deliver, those things still ring in people's minds. That being said in it all, Eubank and Liam Williams, this is not a 50-50 fight. Sky have to sell it as a 50-50 fight. When you look at the level of opposition and the type of guys they fought, Liam Williams is not better than Arthur Abraham. Liam Williams is nothing better than Arthur Abraham, the Arthur Abraham that Eubank fought all those years ago. And Eubank has improved that much. I am looking to see Eubank actually put it all together now with Roy Jones Jr., this Roy Jones Jr. project, put it all together, all that experience with the George Groves fight and the Billy Joe Saunders fight and the Arthur Abraham fight and all those other fights, putting it together now in his career and actually putting on a devastating performance against Liam Williams. That's what I expect. I really expect Liam Williams to come out and be a chancer. He's got Adam Booth in his corner, but for me, Adam Booth, if you look at Adam Booth's success as a trainer, and I'm not knocking Adam Booth at all, but his success seems to be with guys who can punch very hard, who've got fast hands, and are good movers. You look at the two guys that Booth has worked with who've been very successful, and they are David Haye and George Groves. When I look at the Josh Kelly fight, Josh Kelly isn't a big puncher. That was the first thing, right? Josh Kelly isn't a great mover. He's okay. He's not a great mover. I don't think he's a great mover. And he always fights in one gear. So I was very surprised when Adam Booth said that Josh Kelly was the best fighter he's ever worked with, because I'm like, wait, you worked with David Haye. Great. Haye had explosive punching power, decent footwork, but explosive punching power, able to move in and out. I don't know how much Adam Booth can give to Liam Williams at this point in his career, because I just think as soon as the punches start flying in Liam Williams' direction, he's going to go back to type A. This is one of those guys I think is going to go back to type A. I don't expect Liam Williams to get on a jab and box and move around the ring against Eubank in his hometown. Can't see that happening. He's going to want to go to war. He's done a lot of talking. So now he's going to have to put on a performance. But I think when Eubank starts to let his hands go, and I think Eubank is going to hit a lot harder than Liam Williams has been talking about. He says he sparred with him years ago and all the rest of it, but he's better than Liam Williams. Eubank is better now than he was when he sparred against Liam Williams. I don't even know why I even mentioned the sparring session, because it's not even relevant to now, to be honest. I just see, in my humble opinion, I see Eubank stopping Williams inside 6, even maybe inside 5 rounds. I really see Eubank doing a demolition job on Liam Williams. And a lot of this fight is based on Liam Williams' talk and what he's been saying, as opposed to what he's actually done inside the ring. So that's my overview of the fight, Williams and Eubank Jr. Let's hear what you've all got to say. Eubank Jr. stops Mr. Prince Williams. Okay. Don't think Chris Eubank's gas tank is at a good level anymore. Okay. Roy Jones for AJ. Haha. AJ needs to shrink. We're talking about Eubank Jr. Hey, EJ. Happy New Year. Hope all is well with you. Eubank's use style is beneficial for Williams, I believe. If Williams can use a jab, not seen him implement a consistent one, to be honest. I guess that's why he moved to Adam Booth. Okay. This should be a decent fight, but I think Roy Jones, having slowed him down and changed his style, might have made him more susceptible to getting timed and counted. Possibly. Also, it may have made him more patient. So when he'll pick his shots, he'll be more precise with his shots. And therefore, I think he'll land, his punches will be harder. One of the difficulties of all-time greats teaching decent fighters is that they all assume that their students have the same intangibles as them, and it's just not true. Yes, I can understand that, but I've seen him train Isaac Chilembe up close as well. So if it was just one fight he was trying to change, there's a number of fights I've seen Roy Jones fight training now, and he's done a real good job with them. Roy's got a good eye. I think, you've got to I think what we'll see is a mix of what Roy has taught Chris, and I think we'll see what Chris has got as well in this fight, because Liam Williams is going to take the fight to Chris, and I believe that's where we'll see a mixture of the two styles. Will Eubank revert to type 1 once Williams start connecting? That's what I'm saying. If he does start, if Williams starts connecting Eubank, you remember these two have been together for a while, almost 2 years now. We've got the pandemic as well. It's a very unusual situation because of Eubank and Roy Jones, and all that time they've had to work together. I think if he does connect, I think Eubank will do what he does best. That's what I think. And if Eubank does what he does best, even if it was Eubank before Roy Jones Jr., he still beats Liam Williams, in my opinion. Good to hear you, and good to see you, Adam. I'm loving this, Ingram. You've given us two lives or more this week. Great stuff. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge. I'm going to try and do it every day where I can in the mornings. Agree with you, Ingram. Frank Warren did a great job building Williams back up after the Smith losses, but he's not at this level. I don't think he is either, personally. But there you go. What is Eubank's level? World level is Charles Andrade, just a level below them, I believe. Well, you've got to ask yourself the question. At what fight have you seen Chris Eubank Jr. get bullied, battered, and smashed out of sight? The Billy Joe Saunders fight? That didn't happen. The George Groves fight? That didn't happen. He's been beaten, but he's been competitive in those fights. George Groves is no slouch. Billy Joe Saunders is no slouch. Billy Joe Saunders, 2-weight world champion. George Groves, world champion. So it's not like he's been beaten by guys that are bums or guys that can't fight. And he's beaten guys like Arthur Abraham along the way as well. So I think that